So one more time, hello and nice evening. Welcome to another edition of the Videogram. Today joined us Mo Shuker from M3azef. M3azef is a web magazine and online radio that was established as a response to the complete lack of critical writing on contemporary Arab music. M3azef published interviews, mixtapes, radio shows, reviews, and critical writings, also like long reads on contemporary music written in Arabic. Their aim is not to promote the music, but to rewrite the global perspective on Arab and Middle Eastern music and musicians. The platform covers musicians without the need to contextualize them within the political narrative of the region they come from. Although not necessarily shying away from politics, the site primarily puts the artistic merits of the music at the forefront. Practically, with their wide range of activities, they are offering to artists the opportunity to be critiqued in the same way as the Western musician. Mo Shuker is the co-manager of Radio M3azef and also the director of the Ballroom Blitz, which is a club in Lebanon building a sustainable scene that brings up the local talents. On the dance floor, you can also know Mo under the monikers of Jack the Fish and Bakitha. And hereby, I would like to leave the floor to Mo. And one more time, thank you for being with us here today.
No, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jan, for that introduction and for the invitation to talk to you all today. I'm Mo. I'll just briefly reintroduce myself. So I've been working in the music industry for a little bit longer than 13 years now. I'm a performer. I direct the venue, as Jan said, in Beirut, which is a multi-room space dedicated for the modern music lover. I program every week, programs in real life, every day on the radio with my colleague Jinan, who she can't really make it today, but she'll definitely see this recorded later. I also work, I'm a cinema graduate, so I used to work in sound design and sound installations and everything audio related. And I'm a M3azef core team member. I usually handle the radio aspect of M3azef alongside Jinan, but I also handle a lot of back end. And being a core team member of M3azef it generally implies that we all work hand in hand, because M3azef has a lot of outputs, different outputs, which I will take you briefly through, just so I can introduce the platform to you if you're unfamiliar. But basically, every activity that we do it together. Some people take a bigger lead on certain things that they understand better, but all opinions matter. We discuss them very openly. We share insights, because our team is dispersed throughout the Arab world and beyond. For example, I myself, I live in Italy right now. Jinan's in France. Our colleague Rami is in Berlin, etc. We have a lot of contributors actually, because most of us are living in Europe. We need a little bit of insight towards the scenes and micro scenes to just understand better what is happening today, what's being written about and what's not, trying to have a different scoop around things and try to have an insight about what we're talking about, so that we can ultimately and critically write about music in the right way, in a constructive way, and offer our services to any artist, whether it's established or not. So M3azef, I'll just, and I understand that we have in the audience different disciplines, so I hope everything that I'm going to say will translate well in your line of work. Even though this is going to be a little bit more music focused, the talk around the music industry is a little bit more general. There are certain notions and certain ways of thinking that will translate very well to other art forms. And hopefully our way of thinking will resonate with yours. At the end of the talk, you'll have all our contacts, just so if you need to contact M3azef, you'll know who to contact and how. You'll have my email, my colleagues' emails, and you can take it from there. We would love to help and hear from you. Let's begin, actually. M3azef is started as a magazine, and ultimately, well, since the start, you can see that there's a problem. There's a 3 in M3azef, and that's not a typo. I'm not saying the presentation doesn't have a typo, but that isn't a typo, it's intentional. It's not a backwards E, and it's not because of the username was already taken. The 3 is there because our M3azef is ultimately an Arabic word, and phonetically some characters in our alphabet don't translate well to the Latin alphabet. So the Arab community had to take the lead and take initiative and bring in the help of numbers so that we can, you know, associate them with the phonetics missing. So the 3 is A. It doesn't matter now, you don't have to pronounce it right. You can altogether skip it. But basically, M3azef means a derogatory term for musics. Derogatory, that means like music in a bad sense. It's referred to for the first time, we believe, in a quote from allegedly we're gonna have to trust some sources that it came from the Prophet Muhammad. Basically, it was an answer to a question by his peers very early on, his disciples, which was, what do you feel like your people will look like later on? What will they aspire to? And he was a bit pessimistic by saying, well, my people, my ummah, they will probably chase like silk and women and musics. M3azef is musics, basically, a derogatory term, which resonated with us in the team, especially Man, the founder. So the platform was called M3azef. So it means plural of music, but in with a twist to it, a small info. So M3azef.com was the first landing page of M3azef. It's a blog, it's a magazine. It publishes exclusively in Arabic, and it covers all kinds of music, whether it's underground or popular, new or old, Arab or not Arab even. We cover everything that we find interesting, everything that we feel is good music, we push forward with it. We're very particular with the way we publish, and you'll find that out as I go along in this intro. Basically, if it's not interesting, if it's already been written about, we tend to not cover it as much. We try to have a fresh take, a fresh insight towards the bigger themes in world news, or we tend to like chase micro scenes or certain happenings that would not be exposed as they should be. So the website features news, reviews, exclusives, editorials, interviews, and even sometimes we transcribe interviews that we've done on the radio and we do them as an article. In fact, all platforms that we do, they talk to each other in a very specific way. That's very interesting to us. And we keep revisiting the model, seeing if it works, seeing if this is the best it can be, and if it serves the community best. And then after a while, Jinan, my partner, she founded the radio side of M3azef, which is M3azef.live. It's basically an endless stream of music with shows that are talk shows or mixes, podcasts, even editorials and articles from the magazine. We started to turn them into Audible as well and broadcast them on the radio so that a little bit more of the international listener can have an insight on what we're talking about. So there was a lot of motives behind doing this radio and this broadcasting system. Jinan started this project before COVID, so before radios were even a thing again, internet radios. She started the project because she wanted to give a virtual space for the creators of the Arab worlds and beyond to decentralize a little bit the music industry and the music scene, and to give a wider audience to artists that are starting up or well-established artists. Of course, the magazine as well wanted to cater to a bigger crowd, to an international crowd. Even though there's Google Translate, we're sure that some of the articles won't translate so well with the help of these services, as well as a lot of our content are embedded in Arabic or designed in Arabic, which is more often than not available for transcribing or translating. So we decided to go with the radio and discuss everything on the radio in English so that people can have both facets of our work in both languages. So as I said, the radio transmits 24 hours a day, every day. But our way of curation is a little bit more particular in a sense that our program runs a little bit shorter. We don't have shows that start at 8 o'clock in the morning and finish at 12 a.m. Sometimes it could happen, but we generally like to keep the program a little bit more concise. In fact, most of our shows, we try to pin them down on a monthly slot instead of a daily or a weekly, because we want to invite our residents to rethink a little bit the model of radio, give it a go, try to reimagine how these productions can be. In fact, all our shows, or most of our shows, have a little bit of an art house feel to them. They're not always straightforward mixes that premiere, promos from the collective or label or DJ. We try to put a little bit more thought into it and give our listeners something that is a little bit more unique, a little bit more, particular. So the program, on average, runs original shows for about 6 hours a day. The rest of the slots, they premiere music sent to us for promotional use, and the rest are, populated by staff picks, including myself, Jinan, all our editors, all our contributors, everybody. It's even open to listeners to contribute to the music being played on air. The radio is particularly it's particularly passionate about archiving, and we'll get to that later, but it's a big point about the radio. The archive is very important to us because archiving is not really a thing very well practiced in the Arab world, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. But we felt the need to have a database of all these interesting shows, very well archived, track listed, ID'd with genres of music and geotagged to know where these artists come from. In fact, the way we promote shows as well is we promote the artist's work through all our other channels, which we will touch on that as well later. I figured that I would take you through a little bit of our shows, just so you understand a little bit what we're trying to do, where we've been and where we're heading. I'll give you some links later on so that you can check them out for yourself. These are in no means, a very fair way of representing our catalog. I just wanted to give you a glimpse of certain things that we're particularly fond of because they represent something for the stock specifically. And I guess I can take you through some of them. So the first show, I know I told you that every show is monthly, but this is an exception. This is Dirar Kalash. his show Black Hour is a show that focuses on Black music and free music. For those who are not familiar, Black music is an umbrella term suggested by African American musicians in the Americas. And it's just to give justice a little bit to the African American musicians and musicians of color as well, and represent their plight into the type of treatment they had coming into the United States and elsewhere, to reinforce a little bit the past and the history and remind people of the links between jazz and slavery and Cotton Club and etc. And free music is obviously improvised music that doesn't abide any Western arrangements or straightforward music rules and motifs. It's a weekly episode. Every month there's a special that highlights a specific instrument, an artist, a label, or a way of performing. Dirar is really brilliant in making these shows. In fact, he's approaching 100 episodes now, which is wild, considering that we're only on the air for a little bit more than 2 years. He's never missed a week. In fact, when we take a break, he's a little bit peeved at us because he keeps producing wonderful sets. If you haven't listened to his music, I urge you to, because he's a fantastic Palestinian jazz musician. He plays the saxophone and the piano, the keys, among other instruments, I'm sure, but his latest release is Under Weavings, which is a production by Unsound. It was just released like a couple of weeks ago. I'll share with you the links at the very end. Alternatively, you can just surf our website and see the whole archive. This show is particularly, I chose it actually because it gives a window to a happening or a subgenre or a genre that's not actually very much talked about in the Arab world. It brings a little bit of consciousness about racism and anti-racism, about cultural appropriation as well. It gives you really a very concise insight on a genre, and it's brought to you by a very insightful person who reads a lot about the music, converses a lot, performs and tours alongside many of the people he features. So this is one. The second one that I chose to talk about is Farah Zara. She's also a guest writer. She's a contributor to the magazine and to the platform in general. Her show focuses on music from Iraq and the region. The biggest motif that's associated with this region is maqam. You can look that up if you want, but it's essentially just a set of rules like any other, which develop a scene and develop a sound that is strictly associated with the geography. The interesting part about this show is, well, this is a monthly show, of course, and a lot of work comes into this because most of the things that Farah chooses to play, I've never been able to find. And my colleagues, if they hear a track that they like in the set and they want to listen to it later, more often than not, they can't really find it, or they'll find a different version. And this is because Farah actually has a collection of cassettes and records. If it's not her, if it's her family, her neighbors, her colleagues, her professor, she really digs through these material. I know this is not new. A lot of crate diggers do this on a daily basis everywhere in the world. But as you can see in the picture above, this cassette is really like recorded, I guess, manually, and it's written with by hand. So it's probably a rip-off of a live performance or a clone of something else that was either destroyed or can't find it, or it belongs to actually a private collection of the artist. And she had to like really reach out and ask for permission until she was able to bring it on air. The same with the record to the left of the cassette. It's a 45, I guess. It's a 45, and it's made in Greece, co-produced by Bashir Studios, which is, I don't want to run my mouth here, but it's probably a printing press that that doesn't even exist anymore. It brings us back to the notion that you know, archiving and preservation in the Arab world has been a little bit more difficult on us, and it comes from a lot of reasons, including I don't know, a lot of wars, the inability to fund certain preservation programs, a little bit of a culture war as well, a little bit of censorship as well. Same you can see with the photos down. Some of them are even scans from personal catalogs that she has. I tried sometimes to Google reverse image and I never found anything. So it's really modern day archiving and modern day preservation in the best way we can. I'll send you a link as well, but you can actually audibly listen to the hiss of the cassette. You can tell that this is a clone from another thing that was a bit too dusty, that was preserved in a bad way. So ultimately, this show is really important to us because it keeps a digital and soft copy of it that hopefully can, you know, stand the test of time and you know, always be backed up in a certain way and accredited in a correct way. Another show is brought to us drawn by locals. It's now a label, actually. It's their curation stands out because Laith, the founder of Drawn by Locals, he writes about his shows in a very unique way. He pairs two artists, more often than not, one that's regional and one that's from elsewhere. And sometimes the link is a little bit more abstract. Sometimes it's a little bit more direct. Sometimes they work together, and that's why they're paired together. And these shows almost always premiere works of his guests or his contributors. They're almost always exclusives. And some of the guests that he had on, they started their career with this show. Others, we were just introduced to them in a certain way, and now we're very familiar with them and we loved their music and followed them. It's a really nice window to, you know, a very niche scene that Laith is very passionate about. He produces as well. He produces some of these artists on his label. And in fact, his slogan is voice and face to the marginalized brutes, misfits, savages, but the delicate at heart, which I find a beautiful way of describing. Moving on to another show, Hassan Hujairi. His show is Super Village Survey 2000, which is a wild name for a show. Jinan actually followed his career before the radio. You can say that she saw him develop his career in front of her and become such a very talented experimental musician. This show in particular does a parallelism between folk and traditional and a little bit more technology driven and advanced music of today's world. The exploration of futurism through traditions is something that we found very interesting as a topic. And of course, he has a very particular and interesting sense of humor, although he's a very serious artist, but you can tell there's a friendliness and passion towards these kinds of parallelisms and comparisons. His new show now is Counter Assemblage, which is a way to rediscover journalism through field recordings, found sound, and original compositions. He's touring heavily now in Europe, and he's been featured in the Montreux Jazz Festival, among other like-minded festivals around Europe. He's from Bahrain, actually, and his show is, I guess, the middle Wednesday of every month, if I'm not mistaken. I'm conscious that a lot of the shows that I brought forward are a little bit more on the music side. So I wanted to give you a window to other types of shows that we broadcast. This one, for example, is from OPA, which stands for On, Pre, Post, and Act. It's a collective revolving around architecture and research. And the podcast is very well produced. Unfortunately, it's in Arabic right now, but bear with us as we try to either transcribe it to English or convince them of doing another English version. Basically, the podcast dives into intricacies of the architecture world, the politics behind it, because often or not, it's very corrupt to build buildings and do projects in the Arab world. So they dive into these sort of happenings, cultural happenings, and it's very insightful. It happens every month, and they're approaching their last episode for this season. Another type of show, which I mentioned before, is, and it was actually my first duty as M3azef, was to turn the articles into audibles for the international listeners. So my job at first was to see articles that could be interesting to turn into an audible show without a big context into what's happening. It had to be snappy and straight to the point. One of them that was suggested by Man was Mornings Without Fayrouz. So of course it's a morning show. It was an article that's really funny actually, because Fayrouz is a Lebanese artist. She's synonymous almost with mornings. If you grew up like me in Lebanon, you would wake up to the sound of Fayrouz while your parents made you breakfast or something. You would dress up for school, go into the bus, and then there's another track by Fayrouz in the bus. You go outside the bus, and then there's Fayrouz somewhere else. You're haunted by Fayrouz all morning long. Granted, she has a wonderful voice, but obviously it got to the point that it's too much. It was becoming comical. So this article was a bit to highlight a little bit, a little bit of a sarcasm approach to mornings and to remind people that there are other ways to start your morning. It turned out to be a massive success because people got the humor very fast, and it gave them a window to everyday life in Lebanon, which was super cool actually. Another type of, more serious articles which were converted into audibles, for example, is the topic of the Quran. So the Quran is, of course, the holy book in Muslim culture. It's written in Arabic. It's written in prose as well. It's actually really beautiful to read because it's so wonderfully written. Problem is, you can understand it in different ways. Arguably, that's the essence of all problems today in that thing. But ultimately, the Quran has been translated to other languages, of course, but officially it's only Arabic. If you were to pray, you have to pray in Arabic. And if you were to read the Quran in a more social manner, you have to read it in Arabic. Otherwise, it's completely different. And the problem is, of course, you all know that there's a big fat line between entertainment, music for entertainment, and music for religious purposes. And it's not even music, it's actually rituals and reciting the Quran. And the two, allegedly that's what's proposed. Traditionally, you should never mix that. A lot of problems occurred. Some clubs closed because some person didn't know that they were mixing a chant of Quran with a little bit of techno. That got very bad very quickly, and that line always exists in our culture, and it's always a point of question, which obviously we'll not dive into today. but it's always a big question whether, you know, to favor respect over, you know, freedom of speech. Where does this freedom of speech end? How do you actually pay tribute to something so beautiful without recognizing it as music? So this is the idea of the article came through because of this. It felt like the Quran was such a big taboo outside of religion that you had to be like almost surgical about how you could talk about it. And the article that I turned into Audibles along with the team highlighted different people who had different styles in reciting the Quran. And these people really made an impact because for the practiced listener, to people that are in tune with the religion, more often or not, they'll have a favorite person that recites the Quran, but they will not really think of it from a musical stance. And our team tried to highlight the certain styles of these certain people who recite the Quran. And so they give you an example of each one. They write a little bit about how they made this ritual a little bit special. They analyzed it from a music point of view. So it felt really like you were treading a very thin line of parallelism between these rituals, religious rituals, and music, and putting it in a music context was something very important for us. So this show actually runs not every Friday, but some Fridays. And it features a new person that recites the Quran every week with a little bit of a background about their works, how they were unique and how they were perceived, etc. So these are some of the shows that I wanted to share with you. These are some of our residents. These are the people that actually have a monthly show. However, there's much more guest mixes. Some people do very much less often. Some people don't like to be constrained to a specific scheduling, but our contributors are almost everywhere. We have people from the Americas sending us sets. We try to schedule them a little bit later so that they can actually hear their own music. We have a lot of people from the Arab world, and surprisingly, we have a lot of people from Serbia, from Belgrade, from Berlin. I mean, they're all over the place. They handle different types of music. On the website, you can see they're geotagged, so you can know where they come from and what kind of music they are ultimately pushing. And the radio, well, actually before the radio, I just need to tell you about certain other outlets that we have. Our SoundCloud also offers a premiere service. You'll have that email at the end of the lecture, so you can send your premieres if you'd like. Just be mindful to send them a lot in advance so that we have enough time to get back to you. The SoundCloud also features special collaborations, talk shows, different types of curational acts, curational programs, which otherwise don't fit the website in general. Our socials also revisit the radio and the magazine in a way that gives people a little bit of some news or some music on the go. So Instagram is a little bit more slide oriented. To give you an example, there's a slide about the footwork. It just takes you through footwork music, and I'm not sure if it's 7 or 8 slides. Ultimately, the point of it is if you swipe through these carousel posts, you should ultimately know a little bit more on the insight of footwork. I know this is a little bit more obvious in Europe, but our readers are mostly in the Arab world, and this you have a very eclectic range of audiences who sometimes have an insight on footwork that's different from ours, and likewise. We also do top 10 picks of the year, top 100. We do collaborations with other radios, exchanges. This definitely was a breath of fresh air during COVID, because we could converse a little bit with people from elsewhere and really give the opportunity to our residents to shine somewhere else and grow their fan base. And the radio, since the program runs a little bit more tightly, the radio actually plays music that is sent to us through the SoundCloud premieres, as well as our Discord channel. For those who don't know, Discord is like a virtual hangout where it's very customizable. You can actually impose, a certain type of architecture, a certain type of rules. People can also ID tracks that they like through the Discord server. Ultimately, they just write a command and it engages a bot. That bot tells you what music you're listening to right now. Which brings us to the last outlet of M3azef, which is its Discord server. So this was set up, I guess, earlier this year. It was set up to actually create like a virtual community for people to converse, because we wanted to converse with our audience, but our only way was through comments and private messages. And that was never going to be enough because it was going to be too much on our social media rep. So we decided to open up and let everybody that wants to ask something or contribute. The community is split into channels, as you can see to the left. The channels are welcome in any kind of material, whether it's memes, videos, gaming, art, and obviously music, which is split into subgenres. People are welcome to share with us what they're listening, share with us what they are doing as well. Our team shares some insights as much as possible, new releases. In fact, a lot of people, a lot of DJs ask us questions on the electronic channel, and hey, listen, I have a show next week. I'm supposed to play this and that. Can you suggest something? And more often than not, someone will reach out immediately and send them something to help them out. This is particularly important because in the Arab world, you feel like there's a big rupture between countries. Traveling from one country to another is not so accessible to everybody, mostly because some borders are like incredibly closed. As a Lebanese, I'm not allowed to go to Palestine, even though they're exactly my neighbors in the south. Same thing with Syria for a while, and for good reason, because it was a little bit dangerous. We weren't allowed to cross borders to Syria. So ultimately, Lebanon was a little bit like an island, but we're not an island. But we couldn't really take our car and move elsewhere. And plane tickets are not as cheap as EU because of deals and because of the way these services are set up. So ultimately, you could pay like 200 euros just to move to a country that's very close to you, which is not accessible at all to everybody. Add to that the problem of the visas. Some people need visas to cross other countries, including myself. Before, I used to have a visa to cross to Egypt, for example, or Morocco, and it can be quite laborious. It takes a little bit of time, a lot of resources. So it's really easy to feel that you're alone in this if you belong to a certain country, especially Palestinians who are literally annexed inside their own country. It's really easy to feel alone. And with the bad internet connection that you have at home, it's really easy to not be able to converse or gather influences. Even books are sometimes a little bit harder to come by, especially if you're diving into something specific. And when Amazon doesn't work, and when the post office, confiscates a little bit of this, or there's censorships on TV, this can become quite a problem. And young performers can find this a little bit of a hassle. So immediately, some people are dismissive of a career in music because they feel like, what's ultimately going to change for me? I can't really make it. I've seen my city doesn't really have rappers, doesn't really have rock bands. There's probably one or 2 or 3 pop singers that made it, but I'll never be that person. This virtual community that we're trying to build is trying to exactly challenge these notions and bring these people together and moderate it in a way that it's safe for anybody to share and talk freely, no matter what. There's no discrimination whatsoever. You're free to say whatever opinion you want, as long as it's not violent or like putting someone in harm or something. Everything is welcome. All opinions are welcome. And ultimately, it's very friendly to the international community as well. Everything is labeled in English almost. Some channels are in Arabic, but I welcome you to join it because it could be quite useful if you are a musician or a music fan or a music nerd like us. And yeah, I think this is basically the big introduction that I wanted to tell you about M3azef. And which brings us a little bit to our second part of the talk, which is supposed to dive into a little bit of why we're here, why our platform exists, why we should rethink everything, and why we should continue to really reevaluate everything that we're doing and keeping it sustainable and do everything with purpose. Now, there's plenty of reasons other than employing writers and employing musicians and actually creating jobs. There are more motives. Some of them are more direct, some of them are more abstract. Personally, for me, escaping the world music tag is a big thing in my career. And I'm pretty sure other Arab musicians try to avoid that same thing. So basically, you go into a record shop. There's bins that have house music, disco music, tech house, techno, micro house, all these subgenres of the same dance music friendly categories. Same with jazz, modal, bebop, etc., free jazz, and then you have this small sad bin that's labeled world music. You go inside and you can see there's Indian music, Arabic music, music from South America. Ultimately, this makes sense for a record shop. We can't really pretend that record shops can function and have a bin for everything. Otherwise, there'll be skyscrapers that replace record shops. But there's no need for that to translate into the digital world. For big platforms that do music critiques or do music promotions or distribution, it's really unfair for contributors and musicians from our region or elsewhere which don't belong to this Western narrative or Western music industry. It's really not fair for them to be all under the same umbrella of world music, because ultimately world music is everybody's music, no? It can be a little bit frustrating, and this is, and of course there's no blame on these platforms because, I mean, if we weren't to narrate our own story, we can't assume that other platforms will do that for us. And it brings us back to the issue of archiving and preservation. There's no way that someone from, I don't know, France or America or England, there's no way for them to understand what's happening in Sudan, for example, without traveling there, or actually, because Googling these things will only get you so far. And ultimately you'll have to read a book about someone who went there and tried to discover some sort of happening or micro community, or you'll have a distant relative who's obsessed about this kind of style. So that way you have an insight. But we're not really helping ourselves in the Arab community when it comes to preservation and narrating our own music and traditions. And this is where platforms like ours, like M3azef and other platforms, this is where we feel like there's a big, big responsibility to actually help the scene into preserving and archiving well and IDing and critically thinking about how this music came to be, where did it come from, what kind of influenced it, and how does this sound like this today, and why did it sound like that a while ago? What came into play? And ultimately, right now, we're actually seeing the change every day, and we're a part of that change, whether it's fusions from different types of communities fusing music together, like Rai and Trap, for example, or modernizing Tarab in a certain way, or creating a sort of Max for Live device or something a little bit more technical to help you through other scales that are not really familiar with the international community, unorthodox scales that haven't been really tapped into. And we feel like this is ultimately our job today, is because if you were to say that Arab music, ultimately all of these that you see on screen could be Arabic music, and plenty more. This is just a little bit. I understand if it's electronic pop and trap. I understand adding the notion of Arabic so that you make the listener understand a little bit that it's the spoken language, because some of these art forms, especially rap, they rely on the listener actually understanding what they're listening to. But for other places, it's a little bit more frustrating because there's nothing in common between Maqamat and Rai, not in a sense that, not in a traditional sense at least. So it's our job actually to write about these styles, write about where they come from, write about their key players, advise these key players on what to do next, try to distribute them in a certain way, try to get them on the big stage and eclectic stages and festivals around Europe, because this is their living in the end. It's not very unfamiliar for us to be wearing different hats at the same time, whether it's critically writing about these music or actually trying to promote them to other promoters elsewhere so that we can get them to the bigger market as well. And this is actually the plight of every day in the Arab world. The music scene is not wired in the same way as the international one, especially not the American one, and especially not the main big labels. Right now, we are seeing that the big labels have taken a little bit of interest in our region because the rest of the world is a little bit more saturated and they're looking to expand their market. We're here as caretakers. We're here to just not say police, but at least see it through in a dignified way for the musicians so that they have something to rely on, so that they feel like there's a experienced listener understanding what they actually want to say. Because music sometimes, most of the times, is a hobby or a pastime for people who listen to them. And without us trying to put them in a sense where it makes sense for these listeners to understand where they come from, it won't really ultimately do the work justice. And when the musician doesn't feel like their listener understands or actually is interested in the backstory, that's where the productivity goes down, and that's when you will see less and less work develop from a region. And that's not only an Arab problem, that's also an international problem. At least from personally, most of John Coltrane's work, which I admire a lot, it had influences from Indian music, traditional Indian music, which put forward a lot of harmonic scales that were otherwise undiscovered in the American world in the general sense of Western music. And this is where it becomes a little bit more, beautiful and not beautiful. Sorry, that's the wrong word. Interesting and new. And we can all tell that we're exhausting all types of music that's already out. And we need something refreshing. We need to have a wide arsenal at our hands to be able to do something interesting. Otherwise, we're just repeating ourselves. And that would be a little bit depressive for an international listener in general. So what I'm trying to say, actually, as I close this talk and leave the floor for any questions that you might have, it's basically, it's not a continuation. It is a switch these days. It's every country or every community has to find the system that works for them. Otherwise, we cannot be handed down something that worked in the late 70s in America and Los Angeles, for example. It can't follow the same. We can inspire ourselves from a very powerful and lucrative industry, but this has to make proper sense to every single community, and every person in this industry has a lot at stake these days. And nothing proved this more than COVID recently. The whole industry was almost in shambles. And it's now on everybody, including platforms like ours, to think critically about everything, work with purpose, and try to reimagine how everything's at stake, and try to reimagine actually how the music industry can function from now on and keep it sustainable ultimately. Well, that's actually almost everything I wanted to say in a nutshell, but feel free to ask any questions you might have. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you too for really nice talk. I would like to ask you, like, in one of the interviews I read on the web, I think it was Man that mentioned, but also I mentioned in the very beginning of the talk, that like M3azef aims to redefine what does it mean, so like to reimage what means the Arabic music, or like music of Middle East. And my question is, like, how to do that, like how to build your own critical discourse that is not influenced on one hand by the Western traditions and on other hand by the traditional.
Of course. Okay, so we had a talk recently on Line Check last year. The question was, is there a music of the Mediterranean? And that makes sense, because a lot of people want to feel like they belong to something a little bit bigger than themselves. It makes you feel like you belong to something, you know, with a more purpose, more engagement, more audience. There's nothing wrong about that, but I guess we let the people down at the talk, because we said there's no music of the Mediterranean. There's certain motifs, of course, that are similar because of traditions and because of proximity and geography, and because of the same instruments that are being used. But ultimately, there's no music of the Mediterranean, and we like to push for that. We like to encourage, you know, particular sounds coming from different parts of the world and parts of the Arab world. We like to promote uniqueness in everybody's projection and work. Of course, the simple answer is there are certain instruments that you will see again and again in different countries that are close to each other in the Arab world. You know, percussive, a little bit more leaning towards the strings, a little bit more vocal as well. There's also a way of mixing that is different, how you mix, how you arrange, without being too technical, because you can go ahead and check that out. There are undeniably some motifs that come back to us every time, but we like to encourage everybody to do their own umbrella and to self-express and to take something and flip it, you know, to do something new, revisit traditions through other types of musics as well. I mean, we try to follow traditions that are happening in the Arab world and document them, but that's in no means something that should you know, take the front stage always. We encourage people to revisit, rethink, I don't want to say remix, but you know what I mean, like rework everything and try to create something anew always.
Yes, thank you. And also, like, when it comes to writing about like Arab or Middle Eastern music, but I think this can be said, or this can apply in general for like music from diasporas. Like often like, there is put into the forefront the political situation of the region, or like the image of a courageous artist with a strong position, or like with like some strong political statement, etc., where the like musical or aesthetic qualities are the secondary, or they are not even mentioned at all. You as M3azef are bringing the artistic merits into the forefront, and my question is like, has your writing practice or publishing practice in general influenced other media in the region, but not even, or like worldwide, that covers music journalism, or that they are reviewing music to change the perspective, or like to change the way how to write or talk about music?
Well, of course, that's a goal that we always try to lean towards, or actually work towards. Critically writing about our own artists and our own communities, and trying to shed a light in a different way around their works, and trying to reimagine how you should be listening to these kinds of music is always something that's welcomed. The only problem sometimes is the magazine reads in Arabic. So there are certain articles that are being translated into English. Some of them, one of them I can send you at the very end. It talks about the jihad music and extremism. This is a certain insight that you can't do without. You won't read this elsewhere. Same with a little bit of the auto-tune obsession in the Arab world. You won't be able to understand the insight unless it comes from someone from within. So we like, of course, to put a light on these things and put a light on these happenings, and try to influence people to think a little bit more particularly about these works. And hopefully we can try to, break the barrier of language, which is always a problem, trying to, take an idea and put it out there internationally speaking. Otherwise, we like to talk about music seriously, talk about the aesthetics, more than try to associate it with anything political. I mean, personally, I feel like all political music, if it's good, that means it's on the wrong side of politics. And if it's on the right side of politics, it's actually terrible music most of the time. So we try to associate everything like that, politically speaking, and try to talk on a social aspect more. Whether it's the happenings of Sheikh Jarrah, which can be politicized, but they're not from our side. It's just simple. It's a window to something that's happening to a community, and this is the type of help we can do these days to raise awareness. The best way to approach this kind of problem before trying to really write articles in English and trying to distribute them elsewhere is try to narrate your own story. I mean, if we want to talk about Muqata, let's talk to Muqata. Let's talk about his influences in a very intimate way. Let's talk about what's his feeling towards this kind of music, and ultimately just fish in an insight directly to the source. So that maybe, because good journalism has to be true as well, and there has to be an insight to it. So we hope that if we're in this game, let's say, we're actually inspiring a little bit of change every day, hopefully.
Thank you. Actually, this kind of reminds me, or like your words are kind of similar to the last week lecture of Videogram, where Norient presented like the way how to talk or how to write about music. You mentioned that. I'm sorry.
M3azef always wants the listeners to actually just enjoy the music. I mean, there's a saying in the office like, okay, it's new, it's contemporary, it's alternative, whatever. Is it good? That's it. Of course, if you want to dive into it deeper, go ahead. We're happy if you do, but we acknowledge that most people just want to listen to good music. So the music's good, we're all good.
And as you mentioned during your talk, but also before when we talked that like Lebanon is a kind of an island, and also you told me that there is like big energy crisis going on now. So like how or can you like talk more closely about like how it is in these kind of conditions to run a venue like Ballroom Blitz?
Right. So, well, it's very strange to feel like you're an island. You're on an island when you're really surrounded by three sides of you are other countries, but you're never allowed to enter. Now you can enter in Syria, but it's a little bit dodgy, so it wouldn't be really like a fun road trip, let's say. So it's really strange to feel like you can never really take your car or your taxi or your bus and go elsewhere. You feel like you're stuck. And with our very weak passport and very big financial crisis, you're almost stuck in Lebanon. You feel this desperation again and again. Now more than ever, I mean, there were golden years in the 80s and in the late, 2015 was a really good year. But ultimately it's very grim, and it's gotten worse since the explosion. With COVID, it didn't get any better. And right now we have what you can say is 2 hours of electricity per day from the government, and the rest is fully from private generators who are ultimately mafias, let's say. And they only exist because the government lets them to exist. And now you can say that these people who provide you with electricity, even if the government wants to solve this energy crisis, they couldn't be, because these people that they created are so powerful now that you cannot get rid of them anymore. But the point is, with so little electricity and so little financial means and an inexistent post office and bad deals with the Western world as well, you can feel a little bit limited. And when our lira used to, let's say, make it never made $1, it made 1,500 or something. But let me just, put it in a simpler way. If the lira now is 25 times weaker than before. So if I had to book someone for 1,000 euros, I can't book them anymore. I have to divide that by 25 times, and that will never be enough to cover any expense coming into Lebanon for anybody. So it's really challenging, and that's where we try to reimagine a little bit, put the focus a little bit on locals, try to create like a mini tour for artists to come to Dubai, Egypt, Turkey, just so we could share a little bit of the cost. It's small changes, it's small adaptations that help us a little bit try to solve these problems, but ultimately it's very, very challenging these days. And it's through venues like Ballroom or through interventions like M3azef, because M3azef also lends a hand to inspire these people in Lebanon. There's also Beirut Synth Center. There's a lot of people that want to do good, that want to, give free access to the venue. In fact, our venue is open to anybody that wants to use it. It's funded through the Arab Funds of Arts and Culture, which also funds a part of M3azef's activity. So it's kind of, we're building a scene from start, quite simply. There's no easy fix. We hope for reforms. Next month, there's going to be the elections. We really hope that people are wiser. They elect new, more competent officials. But from now until then, we just have to power through, feel a sense of camaraderie and try to build something new together.
Yes, but I think you always can like make a venue where you will be booking big names. You will kill the price on the entrance. You will have brutally expensive drinks, etc. You didn't went that way. Like you are more like sustainable, more like affordable to the locals, and also like for the locals, like pushing the local producers to the front. Can you tell more about this? Like why these motivations?
Well, when I started to DJ, there were a lot of clubs. In fact, Beirut is kind of dubbed the clubbing capital of the Arab world before, and it just never made sense to us. Me and my partners and my teammates. It never made sense to us to be in Beirut, have our lira be 1,500. It's an insane amount. Our bills are like huge with a lot of zeros. It just never made sense to me that on any given weekend, you would have Dixon, Solomon, Giborato, all these huge names competing on the same day. You'd be so spoiled for choice. You would go on Resident Advisor and you would see like 4 different headliners. I mean, in Ibiza, there you don't have it. In Berlin, sometimes you don't have it. Felt like something was missing, and there was an obsession about mainstream techno, and now it's melodic techno, and before it was trance. But it felt like we were missing a little bit, alternative hip hop, a little bit of experimental, a little bit of down tempo. I enjoyed it quite a lot. I used to play it in bars, and all my colleagues used to enjoy it as well. So we figured, let's venture into something. We flipped a restaurant that we used to have. We flipped it every month and called the club night Ballroom Blitz. And that club night used to debut genres every time. So the first time was down tempo, which was really stressful for us, because you don't know how people will react. It's literally 80 beats per minute versus 130. So we didn't know if people were gonna like it, if people were gonna walk out. It would be really embarrassing, especially since we invite people from elsewhere. Our first act was OI, and then Marta van Straten, and then Kalisi, like pretty renowned names in Berlin and that scene in particular. People took to it well. Second month, we tried to spice it up. We said, okay, we're not gonna play it safe. Let's always take risks, otherwise we're dead. So we kept changing the styles. The next time was alternative hip hop with Cuthead. It was like finger jamming a la J Dilla style. People liked it. Then we said, okay, let's go techno, but techno revisited, and etc. and etc. Until this restaurant was completely above full capacity, to the point that it was a bit dangerous. So we said, okay, let's cut it here. Let's do a venue. My partner Joe, he's a restaurateur and he's the financer and the owner of the Ballroom Blitz. I only directed, I'm the co-founder, and I'm blessed to work with him because he wanted to prove a point in the scene. He wanted to say, okay, it's all fine and well to do a business out of this and maximize and profit and etc. But there is a way of slowly getting back your return on investment, and ultimately just keep it affordable for everybody, and try to, not educate, but we did educate people in the end, but try to, expose people to new things, new experiences, and this will eventually make them feel younger and, still trying to understand and make them understand that the world is a huge place. Remind them that we're not an island only. There are borders that extend beyond Lebanon. There's plenty of interesting stuff that happen, which sometimes people tend to forget. So it was always like this. The ticket was the cheapest in town, and our cost was triple. We had 3 sets of cost for 3 rooms. It was always like this, and we enjoyed keeping it that way. And in fact, we've most of the DJs that came to visit us from elsewhere, the international DJs, they were so kind to us to the point that they almost played for free. So these shows are actually still happening even with the crisis, because they saw an energy and they want to preserve it.
And how the COVID situation, but also the explosion, did it like really radically change the face of the club scene?
Well, I mean, the explosion, of course. After the explosion, the whole country felt like it was doomed. The whole thing was closed. After that COVID, it felt like a ghost town. And to pay your respects to such a big tragedy, it was obvious that we weren't going to open for a while. We contemplated about closing for a while, and then we said, no, you know what? This country needs one more venue like this, not one less. So might as well just stay in and let's try. Happily though, even though vaccination rates are very low in Lebanon compared to elsewhere, the amount of vaccinated people among clubbers were high. So we were able to welcome in people as soon as some regulations came into place. But unfortunately, the government is really incompetent. So in fact, we were copying regulations that I've been seeing here in Milan or in Berlin. I just tried to figure it out by ourselves. And we refused to open until it was relatively safer to operate. And we had to really build, us and other clubs, we're not inventing the wheel alone. All clubs in Lebanon tried to reinvent how we are going to welcome in people. We set up rapid PCR tests by ourselves at the door with no help from the government, even though the clubbing industry is one of the most lucrative industry to Lebanon's economic situation. In fact, it's the most lucrative. I'm pretty sure it's $1 billion industry in Lebanon before the explosion. With no help from the government, with no help from anybody, us promoters just gathered our thoughts and tried to develop a safe way for people to club. Of course, COVID really hit Lebanon hard because there's a little bit more of misinformation. There's a little bit less of vaccines readily available, less hospitals, which means that hospitalization is going to really be difficult. Beds are going to saturate much quicker than here. But I'm really happy to say that we tried our best, and I think we didn't really contribute to a spike by ourselves. We really, there was a consensus here that we should all have a responsibility. Otherwise, there's no government to tell you you're doing something wrong. So let's us self-police a little bit. And I think it worked.
Nice to hear that you're still continuing. Maybe like really like general question, like what's the future for the M3azef, but also for the Ballroom? What's your future plans?
You're back. Sorry, maybe I cut. Sorry.
No. It's like it's just writing that I'm unstable.
Okay.
Yeah. So one more time. General question: what's the future plans of Ballroom, and also for M3azef?
Yeah, of course. So very briefly, Ballroom will continue its programs on the alternative side. We closed for the summer, but we're back open in October. We plan to continue opening our doors for anybody wishing to use the platform, the venue and its resources. And we'd like to thank the Arab Fund for Arts and Culture again for making this possible. Otherwise, for M3azef, I guess we're trying to ride the wave of Web3 now, trying to reimagine a little bit the community, how we can help the community in a different way. We're trying to develop more shows. We're trying to expand a little bit our residents so that we can actually try to distribute their work in a better way. And most importantly, we're trying to keep an eye and ear open for anybody that needs our help, because that's the most important thing when you try to reimagine the scene.
And when it comes to help, like let's say that some of the students want to promote their music or not even, or want to propose a TV show, like you have already like local names for us, like you have like Czech, like Fonon Crew, Gin Platonic or Genot. Center.
Of course.
So what they can do?
I mean, I'll send you an email that you can forward, which has some insights, but ultimately you have a direct line with any of us. You have some emails that you can reach out to me personally for radio, or Jinan. You can reach out to Rami for premieres. We can develop a show together. If you don't know what exactly you want to do, we'd love to develop it with you. And if you can join the Discord channel as well, I can send you a specific invitation for the people who attended this talk, and maybe we can actually welcome you into Discord, because there you can actually see what's going to happen in the future before it happens. It gives you a little bit of a different visibility. But I can just pass you an email with a small write-up so that you can know where to reach out to and how.
Great, thank you. Thank you for this. And yes, and at this point, I will one more time thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your talk, and also I thank you for all the activities that you are doing with M3azef, but not only with M3azef, but also inside of the Lebanon scene.
Thank you. No, thank you for having me. Really, it's a pleasure.
Okay, so hope to see you on the dance floor.
Likewise. If anybody's in Iran, hit me up. Or in Lebanon.
Yeah. Thank you. Ciao.